Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Sol at the Movies. I just got back from seeing The Star by Sony Pictures Entertainment, and here are my thoughts on it. So The Star tells the story of the first Christmas, aka the Nativity, in Christian storytelling. So it's the birth of Jesus Christ, told from the perspective of the animals. So it follows a young donkey named Bo, who helps get Mary and Joseph to Bethlehem so that Mary can give birth to the Son of God. That's pretty much it. It's just the nativity story, but told from the animals' perspective. Now, when I saw the trailer for this movie, I thought it looked just awful, just so horrendous, a terrible idea with terrible execution, and I was not looking forward to watching this movie, I'm not gonna lie. I was really dreading it, actually, because I thought not only was it going to be bad as a movie, but it was going to be bad as a religious movie, as in it was trying to be modern and hip and might be interpreted as sacrilegious. Like, I'm not a religious person, and none of the comments I make are for or against religion in this video. I don't really care. I'm just saying is that I thought it would be really embarrassing. But actually, I was very surprised by it. Now, do I think it's a good movie? No. But in terms of the way it handles the nativity story, it's fine. It's not really insulting or anything like that, bar a couple of moments, I'd say. It doesn't try to modernize it too much, other than with the dialogue itself. So, in terms of the execution of the story, it's just the nativity story, but with more of an emphasis on the animals. So I'm not super familiar with the story of the nativity. I know the gist of it, but I'm not really familiar with all the in-depth parts. And in terms of character, I don't really care about any of the characters. Like, Mary is nice and kind to animals, and, you know, so she's the virgin who's blessed by God to give birth to Jesus Christ, or sorry, the Son of God. And then there's her husband Joseph, who's a carpenter, who just kind of gets roped into it, not gonna lie. They're okay, although I have to wonder why Mary would have green eyes when she's from, you know, sort of the Middle Eastern kind of area. That's weird. I mean, all the skin tones in it kind of bother me. They're not very, if there are white people in it, why are there white people in the nativity story? I know that's debatable and people are like, ooh, God is white. Okay, but seriously, nobody should be white in that movie. They should be either brown or black or oriental, like for the three wise men, but nobody should be white. But whatever, anyway, that's not a huge complaint, it's just something that kind of bothered me. But yeah, Mary's green eyes also bother me, but as characters, they're fine. Bo, the donkey, is nice, actually. He's likable, I would say. His goals are kind of weird. He wants to join the royal caravan, but then gets roped into, you know, helping Mary give birth to the Son of God. So I guess you'd consider that an upgrade. But he's got a best friend, a dove named Dave, who kind of reminds me a little bit of High Five from the Emoji Movie, but not nearly as aggravating. He's more aggravating in the start than he is near the end. So, there's also a sheep named Ruth, who's sort of a hyperactive sheep who strayed from her flock. That's kind of it. You know, she's like a lone sheep, sorta. And then there's the three camels, which are black, yo, and they got nothing. There's not really any point to them, other than just the female one, whatever her name is, she's like prophetic or something, and the other two are silly. And the main villain technically is King Herod, who's got a good voice because he's voiced by Christopher Plummer, but that's about it. He's barely in the movie. It's like maybe 2 minutes of him being in the movie, but he's not really that important anyway, so whatever. The main villains are like an assassin who goes to kill Mary. I don't think he even has a name. And then there are the two dogs that the assassin has, who's like the animal enemy. You know, whatever. They're just kind of standard mustache twirling villains. I mean, characters aren't where it excels. It does have a couple good character moments, like when after Mary tells Joseph that she's pregnant with the Son of God, and Joseph has to think about it. I think that was a genuinely good scene. But in general, the characters aren't where it excels. So, where it excels, there isn't really any one point I can point out of it being, like, good, necessarily. All of it's just kind of fine overall. It's sort of like a flatlining heartbeat, just going ee throughout the whole thing. It's not bad, necessarily, it's just nothing about it evokes any sort of emotion from me. It's one of those movies I could never picture myself ever seeing again because I would just stop caring. Like, I'd never think of it again. But you know what? As I thought it was going to be just horrible. So the fact that it wasn't horrible is actually one of the good things I can say, is that this idea that was completely doomed from the start actually turned out to be kind of okay in the end. And that's a pretty big compliment I could give it. I mean, telling the nativity from the animal's point of view reminds me of that cutaway gag in Family Guy where it's Brokeback Mountain, but from the point of view of the horses. So, it's a dumb idea, but in terms of the execution, it could have been a lot worse. So I guess that's kind of the only bone I can throw it, is that it could have been a lot worse. Is it good, though? I wouldn't say. I mean, the soundtrack is extremely obnoxious. The ending goes on way too long, and it's way too on the nose about Christmas and all that stuff. And, I mean, it has severe plot diarrhea at the start, too. It doesn't even take a second to establish Joseph and Mary's relationship before the angel visits her, giving her the message about the Son of God. Just, it doesn't really seem to care that much about anything except telling the nativity story, which in a way is admirable. It doesn't get bogged down with a bunch of stupid side shit, I would say. It keeps on focus. It's nice and tight. I mean, it's not bizarre and all over the place. It's just a straight-up telling of the nativity story. So, can I fault it for that? No. You know, it actually kind of reminds me of Prince of Egypt in that regard, although not nearly as good. Prince of Egypt is my favorite religious movie and favorite DreamWorks movie because of how well it told the religious story. It referred to God and Jesus without, you know, shoving religion down your throat. It's not like God's not dead and God's not dead too. It's not made for religious people for them to feel good about being religious people. It's just to tell a religious story, and I can respect that. I really can. So, is the star good? No. Is it bad? No. It's just okay in all, like, yeah, it's just okay, I would say. Would I recommend it, though? I mean, why? Why would you watch it? I have to say, like, the animation isn't stellar. The fire animation really kind of bothered me, just looked cheap. Looks like something some really, really talented animator would make in Maya for like $10,000, but this movie had a budget of $20 million, which is piss low for an animated movie, so, you know, for what it's worth, I'm not gonna criticize it that much, because of all the shit that I've seen this year, with the Nutjob 2 and Emoji Movie and Boss Baby, all the garbage that's come out this year, this one is actually one of the better movies. That's not saying much, but it is one of the better movies. So, personally, I don't know if I'd recommend it. You might find it a little bit sacrilegious if you're, like, super conservative about religion. I am not even gonna begin to touch that with a skull pole. I'm just going to say, you might like it, you might not like it. I don't recommend it, but I also don't not recommend it. It's hard to say. So, I guess just make up your own mind. Just like religion itself. Just make up your own mind. And that's all I have to say about that.